GamerGate. It's a topic that seemingly no one can keep from talking about. It's something that started out as a bunch of people slut-shaming and suddenly exploded into one of the largest potato debates the internet has ever seen. I've seen more articles and Tumblr posts about this than ISIS or the impending threat of World War III. Now, I'm not going to talk at length about all the initial details about Zoe Quinn and her relationship because it really doesn't matter. Zoe Quinn made a game called Depression Quest. It's a pretty interesting game. Depression Quest is essentially a really basic visual novel, more of a choose-your-own-adventure short story that makes some really great statements about clinical depression and the effects it has on an individual. Fast forward what must have been years, and Quinn is trying to get the game on Steam. People complain because, for some reason, Depression Quest isn't enough of a game to be on Steam, even though Gone Home is a multiple award-winning game with less gameplay than a Newgrounds hentai game, but it was put on Steam without much complaint. But that's another story. Anyway, at the same time, Depression Quest started getting more exposure, due to the Steam re-release apparently officially making it a game. And with popularity comes articles on gaming sites and bullshit awards. Now usually this wouldn't be a problem, but this is where the initial controversy came in. See, once Depression Quest started winning awards and getting positive reviews, it came out that Quinn had been sleeping around behind her boyfriend's back. This already made people hate her, but slut-shaming alone does not a controversy make. The real problem was with who Quinn was sleeping with, the very men who were giving her these positive reviews and rewards.
How dare she?
The gamers shouted from Twitter.
She's not only a whore, but is also using sex to manipulate opinions of her game.
Suddenly, #GamerGate. However, to me, Quinn has played her part. I don't care about Quinn, or her decent game, or the stupid awards her game won. What this did for me is expose something that I, along with many others, have known about for years. The not so much corruption, but unprofessionalism and lack of transparency that is the essence of so-called gaming journalism. A prominent member of gaming press sleeping with a developer isn't a bad thing on its own. That press member going on to write a review for that game, on the other hand, is. It's not even limited to the fact that they allegedly had sex. The real issue here is that if you want to be called a gaming journalist, you have to do one of two things. Either be completely impartial to the subject that you're talking about, or be transparent about the fact that you aren't impartial. I don't mind the idea of a fan of a series reviewing a game. Hell, in a lot of cases, that's exactly what I want. But I don't want someone to hide that fact from me, simply because if it is the case that I don't want that review to be biased due to previous experience, then not knowing the review is prematurely tainted is a disservice to both myself and any other similar readers. You wouldn't trust an employee of EA to give an unbiased review of the new Call of Duty, or the new Battlefield. So why would you believe said employee's friend, or their lover? The United States justice system has been aware of the unreliability of individual opinion for quite some time. This is why there's an interview process when being part of a jury. They're not going to just let the defendant's aunt be on the jury, because she's not going to be impartial. This is a process that I doubt anyone would disagree with. Barring intentional jury poisoning on the part of one side or another, this process creates an impartial jury, which is what either side would want. Why then should we not expect this sort of unbiased opinion on the part of our gaming journalism? Or at the very least, some transparency in the case of bias, for the sake of the ones who are using gaming journalism to make purchase decisions. This is where I think GamerGate has completely lost what the initial controversy should have been about. Fuck Quinn and her bullshit. Fuck Anita Sarkeesian and her attempts at using this to regain any sort of relevance outside of perpetual hatred and distrust. And fuck Phil Fish for ever thinking he was relevant as anything other than the guy who made Fez. Stop treating this like it's something TMZ brought up and use what has been discovered as something to actually think about. Think back if you remember to the last time something this significant happened, specifically in gaming journalism. The major thing I tend to think of is the Kane and Lynch 2 review that got GameSpot editorial director Jeff Gerstmann fired. In case you don't remember, Eidos paid for a bunch of Kane and Lynch 2 ads to cover GameSpot leading up to the release of the game and the lifting of their review embargo. Then the review launched, and it was extremely negative. GameSpot took it down, and Gerstmann, the reviewer in question, was fired. A week later, after 6 days of no comment, GameSpot said that the removal of the review and all Kane and Lynch 2 ads, and the quitting of another prominent employee, were all coincidences, and they had nothing to do with Gerstmann's termination, which was due to unrelated issues that had been going on for a considerable amount of time prior. Needless to say, everyone else called bullshit. GamerGate is just another one of these bullshit moments where something important is going on in a media format that millions of people rely on or even participate in. Am I saying that Depression Quest received positive reviews and awards because Quinn is a slut? No, not necessarily. As I said before, Depression Quest is a genuinely good game. It demonstrates clinical depression in a unique and eye-opening way. I highly recommend playing it at least once. Now, the reason that her sleeping around is significant in any way is because it creates the bias I was talking about earlier. Had all this investigation and controversy not happened, there's no telling how many people would still not have yet realized how terrible the state of gaming journalism is, and how unreliable the opinions gamers rely on tend to be. And rather than focus on this fact, most of what I see is a bunch of articles talking about how sexist everyone who's against Quinn is. Of that, I really have little opinion other than the shit posts by idiots saying that gamers are a shit group of sexist neckbeards, but most of, if not all, those posts and articles are written by people who are notorious for being unreliable, pathetic excuses for writers, and the only ones paying attention to what they write are the ones who already agreed anyway. Again, this isn't about Quinn anymore. She probably fucked some dudes that may or may not have affected those guys' opinions on her game. The real problem is the lack of transparency involved. I mentioned unreliability earlier, specifically in regard to the opinions of gaming journalists and reviewers, those who many gamers base their purchasing opinions on. These are the places where Metacritic gets its scores, and while I could go on at length about Metacritic, as many others already have, GamerGate brings about yet another reason to distrust even Metacritic, simply due to the inherent unreliability of gaming news outlets. And it's not like gaming sites are totally unaware of this fact. It's not just for the sake of credit that sites publish the writer of each article. It's been a tradition carried over from newspaper, and it's a tradition because it allows more loyal and savvy readers the knowledge of whether or not the article is going to be fair or well written before even reading a single word. It's simple to draw parallels from other media. You likely listen to the majority of the catalog of a certain musical artist because you've come to expect that their music will consistently be favorable to you. Most obvious is the similarity with YouTube channels, Twitter handles, or any other means for someone to follow the output of a certain creative who tends to release things that one could find agreeable. People like Angry Joe, Total Biscuit, or Yahtzee, they all have a following of people who tend to agree with the opinions of those they follow. They're aware of each person's bias or lack thereof before any statement from the content creator in the first place, and the viewer takes this into account. Websites like Kotaku or IGN, however, tend to be different, in that the readers rarely take into account the individual author's previous work, whether this is because the reader would have had to have regularly read that particular site and actually keep track of who wrote what, or whether this is simply a matter of the reader treating the site as some sort of hive mind entity without individuality is a matter of debate. In any case, unless a particular writer goes out of their way to create an identity, the person writing the review of a game is going to be seen simply as a voice of the site, not as that person. In Kotaku's case, the only two writers I can even name are Stephen Totilo and Patricia Hernandez. Opinions of each will vary, but of all the writers on Kotaku, those are certainly the most prevalent for their own reasons. IGN, on the other hand, I recognize one writer from, and even then only in videos. IGN as a whole, however, has a massive negative reputation, practically across the board. Ask anyone who regularly reads game reviews, and chances are they'll say that IGN is entirely unreliable when it comes to ratings. Of course, this is usually attributed to IGN ironically being the largest gaming news site, and therefore the most bought off, but what it's never attributed to is the individual writer of each review. YouTube-style reviews are still a fairly new medium, but their influence is massive. Viewers treat YouTube reviewers as gaming sites in and of themselves, only making it easier to forget that a site like Demonoid or Giant Bomb isn't run by one person but many. And with that, it's easy to forget that each person has his or her own specific tastes and biases. But why did I go off on such a tangent? To bring up the point that it's still gaming sites' fault that this disconnect is happening. Kotaku, IGN, and the rest need to take steps to resolve this problem, and putting out more and more articles about sexism aren't going to do that so much as sully the site's reputation and the reputation of gaming media in general. The only site that I can think of that deals with this well, intentionally or not, is That Guy with the Glasses. Now, that isn't to say that anyone treats That Guy with the Glasses as a reliable news or review site, necessarily, but look at the way the site is formatted. Rather than saying that individual videos are part of the larger That Guy with the Glasses collective, each one is attributed to its author, and thereby attributes any upset involving the video to the creator, rather than the website. This is what I think needs to be done with other gaming news sites. Rather than trying to emulate the gaming magazines of old, gaming sites need to put more focus on the actual content creators, so that readers can actually develop some level of trust, rather than immediately dismissing anything from the site as garbage. Total Biscuit did a video on this subject recently, and at one point he brought up that different people use gaming media for different purposes. Some prefer to read straight-up news articles or press releases and little else. Others like to know about gaming culture and keep up on trade shows or what have you. Still others only want reviews so that they can make informed purchase decisions. Similarly, particular writers only like writing certain kinds of articles, whether they be straight up republishing press releases tied in with some sparse commentary, an opinion piece on why cosplay is art, or a review of an indie game from 10 years ago. By attributing these kind of articles to certain people, you not only get readers who are devotees of your individual writers, but you also get writers who get to write what they want and receive credit for it. I guess I'm saying that large-scale gaming news sites should become content aggregators, but only for specific writers. But that still leaves one glaring problem: transparency. Even if you have individuals taking credit for what they write, gaining followers of their own, it solves nothing if those writers aren't upfront and in the open about where their feelings come from. If a writer is best friends with the concept artist on a game, then that should be part of the article in question. It simply isn't fair to readers to hide bias for the sake of appearing impartial when impartialness is a big part of why people care about the work in the first place. This isn't something that can be solved with a new system or practice on the part of gaming sites. It comes down to the willingness of individual writers to say when they're going to have a bias about something. It isn't even a matter of disallowing a writer to write about a game just because they have a relationship with that game. Maybe they're still capable of being impartial in spite of it. Let that come down to the opinions of your readers. The key is to put the fact out there rather than waiting for a massive controversy to bring it about, destroying any trust the readers might have held in the site in the first place. This has gone on long enough, and I'm sure I've repeated myself a number of times, but hey, that's what people have come to expect from me. And that just goes to prove my point. If a single person likes or shares anything I make, they're just another point for my argument. People want individual opinions that they know they can trust, and the only way they can trust an opinion is to know the person who has that opinion and why. I don't hide anything from anyone when it comes to my biases, because individual opinions and experiences are what make the medium interesting anyway.